Grange-over-Sands is old school Lancashire, by which we mean that it used to lie within the Lancashire boundaries before provocative changes for nefarious political reasons forced it into Cumbria, allegedly. What the residents of Grange-over-Sands think about this, we honestly couldn't say because we haven't asked them. Given that the town was mostly founded during the Edwardian era, due to rich people wanting a seaside resort sufficiently removed from the common or garden Lancastrian plebs, they're probably not complaining. Michelle wants to live in Grange-over-Sands, which is why we've got an Art Deco poster of the place on our living room wall. She says she's drawn to the town, in the same way that Daddy Longlegs are drawn to flypapers. Grange-over-Sands, and I'm going to keep using the full title because we haven't really got much else to say about the place, didn't really occur until the early 19th century. There's more history to the town than the attractive Victorian-stroke Edwardian architecture, of course, but it's mostly under wraps. For example, a Bronze Age cemetery was excavated at Church Road in 2001, and numerous other prehistoric portable antiquities have been discovered, along with Roman coins and a Roman-occupied cave, don't ask, I'm not sure what that one's about myself, at Kent's Bank. It's all very exciting, if you're an archaeologist. But not a lot happened after the Romans, apart from the monks of Carmel Priory owning the Grange itself. It was recorded in 1536 as Grange with Kentish Bank, until the aforementioned early Victorian period. At that point, Grange, it wasn't quite Grange-over-Sands just yet, was a virtually unknown hamlet of whitewashed cottages, only accessible by horse-drawn coaches over the dangerous sands of Morecambe Bay. Naturally, such an unspoilt retreat from the grime of civilization wasn't going to last. Word got around, the village started to sprout expensive properties, and the arrival of the railway in 1857 secured a brand new chapter in Grange's history, not to mention more tourists. Bathing was popular, all very proper and dignified of course. The bathers were attended by one Fanny Wright Stockpit, famed for wearing her magnificent poke bonnet, crowning a befilled nightcap, apparently. The postman back then was an old codger who walked from Lindale to Grange every day with the letters in the brim of his hat. Being illiterate, he allowed the recipients to choose their own correspondence from the pile. That'd never happen nowadays, of course. Imagine the checks and postal orders that must have gone missing. Incidentally, as you've probably gathered by now, this week we're just randomly sticking in bits of footage. If the visuals don't match the narration, don't blame me, I've been overworking recently. Because of its rise in popularity, common old Grange was eventually forced to become the more grandiloquent Grange-over-Sands, at the suggestion of Canon H.R. Smith, the local vicar, incumbent from 1858 until 1888. Who was tired of his post ending up at the similarly named Grange at Borrowdale. As the resort became more fashionable, local celebrities started to arrive, such as John Wilkinson, the Iron Master. Actually, he arrived a century earlier, but who's counting? To say that Wilkinson dabbled in iron would be like saying that Henry VIII had a passing interest in getting his leg over. Wilkinson built ironworks all over the shop, was one of the main instigators behind the Iron Bridge, at Ironbridge, obviously, and created the first barges made of wrought iron, amongst other iron-related stuff. He bought Home Island in 1765, built a 3-storey house with a tower on it called Castlestead, and connected a bridge to the mainland for access. Much to the church's disapproval, he condoned work on Sundays. Naturally, this upset the pious locals, so he employed Irish labourers instead. In fact, Wilkinson was a bit of a jack-the-lad who didn't prove popular locally at all. As one biographer put it, he was a blunt sort of man who tended to flaunt his mistress. That's putting it politely. In simpler terms, along with his legally recognised family, Wilkinson also had 3 children to his housekeeper, Anne Lewis. He fathered the youngest at the ripe old age of 77, proving, if nothing else, that iron is good for the libido. So obsessed was Wilkinson with iron that he requested to be buried in an iron coffin, not the medieval torture device, obviously. When he died, his body was brought home across Morecambe-Sands in a wooden coffin lined with lead. It proved so heavy, it sank in the quicksand. The coffin bearers had to wait until the tide changed before they could retrieve it. He was buried on Home Island, but litigation between his families ate through his legacy Bleak House style. Bankruptcy happened. The island was sold. Understandably, the new owners wanted his corpse removed to the churchyard at Lindale, his original birthplace. However, the parson there considered him to be a person, albeit a dead one, of low moral standards, which, coming from a Lancastrian vicar with the sort of reputations they had, must have been extremely low, and wouldn't allow him to be buried in consecrated ground. So Wilkinson ended up interred outside the graveyard. Years later, the churchyard was extended, and he was finally allowed back into hallowed ground, regardless of his misdemeanours. Enough. Same time next week, if you're interested. Incidentally, I forgot to mention the Grade 2 listed Lido, currently undergoing restoration. Well, when I say forgot to mention it. Oh, and there was a wooden pier at Grange-over-Sands once as well. That's gone now.